person. But no, welcome everybody. Yesterday was an excellent day, and the day before, because we've had 2 days. And I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves in a moment, but today is very different because for 2 days we've heard about the horrible, the stats, the trends, and much of the focus has been on the hotel and the lodging, because primarily that's where a lot of the incidents are. Today's events focused. So it's a very, very different discussion, I think, compared to what we've had for the past 2 days, and hopefully very interesting. So it's really about how do events contribute positively and negatively to the issue of human trafficking. Before I start, I'm really going to ask everybody to give, and you've got a few minutes because we've got plenty of time this morning. I'm going to start the in-person people, and then I'll bounce online. And just before Alan starts, I just want to say, Alan is amazing. Every time I go to an event for human trafficking, I get loads of plaudits, congratulations, Alan, you're amazing. And obviously I take it, because I'm British, so I take whatever applause. At the end, I thought, I think you mean the other Alan. He's the one that does. So Alan, thank you very much for making me very popular. But Alan, would you like to just introduce yourself, your role, just for a minute or two?
So my name is Alan Wilkett, and I am just a retired street cop.
He's a lot more than a retired street cop, let me tell you. He is one of my great mentors and an expert in the field. Am I going to do your introduction for you? I think I just did. Hi, my name is Sarah Mahoney, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Florida Human Trafficking Victims Fund. We support law enforcement efforts to identify, rescue, and stabilize victims of human trafficking across the state of Florida.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jody Domingue. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for One More Child. One More Child is a 122-year-old organization whose mission is to provide Christ-centered services to vulnerable children and struggling families. I say we have been working with trafficking victims for 122 years because anywhere there are pockets of poverty and trauma, there is exploitation and human trafficking. We formally got into human trafficking work when we opened one of the first certified safe homes for minor domestic females back in 2013. Since we've evolved our models, but I believe you have heard a lot the last 2 days from our amazing staff and expert leadership, and right beside me is one of them, so I will let her introduce herself.
Thank you, Jody. Good morning, everyone. My name is Olivia Littleton. I work with One More Child as well. I oversee our largest anti-trafficking mobile team here in Central Florida. I have the honor of supporting lots of survivors across our Central Florida area and Florida. And our mobile teams are also in some additional states. So we're in Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Ohio. I'm the co-chair of the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force as well. And then I'm also honored to be on the advisory board of UCF's Center for Human Trafficking and Modern Day Slavery.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike Duignan. I'm a professor in events, used to be an associate professor here at UCF, miss this place so much. And I'm the founder and chair of the Center for Events and Festivals, which is the first international professional body for events and festivals in the world. The idea of talking about standards and how we should do things is a conversation in the event sector that we're having, but no one's quite taking up that mantle. So that's why we wanted to set up the center. And I was the director of research for the former senior leadership team of London 2012 Olympics and Paralympic Games that are now a global sports consultancy called Trafficking, who run sort of Formula Ones and half the World Cup, COP, Davos, and that sort of thing. So
please don't mention Davos.
Davos, Trump, yeah. So I come at it from a academic perspective, but also quite recently having a lot of engagement with the upper echelon of the sports world. And oh my God, that's been interesting and worrying. So I'll give some of those insights.
Thank you, Mike.
It's good to have you back, even for a few days. We miss you terribly, yes. Okay, everybody, good morning. And for those of you that are viewing online, when you do watch this on our YouTube channel, I'm Dr. Jessica Wickey Byrd, Executive Director of the UCF Center for the Study of Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery. And I have the honor to advance all education, research, and community outreach for the university and the college. And that includes partnering and collaborating with other institutions of higher education, all of our local nonprofits, all of our for-profit organizations. And so it's really we want to build Florida as the national model against trafficking, and so that we will then lead the United States in anti-trafficking efforts. And we're gonna have a tagline: Florida is open for business and closed for trafficking. And that comes directly from my dear friend Alan Wilkett down there. We're gonna get t-shirts, y'all. We're all gonna wear them. It's gonna be great. And so if you are out there and want to partner with the center, please reach out. Come to our website, hospitality.ucf.edu/HTMS. Thanks.
Beautiful, thank you. And then we're going to bounce to the screen. Thomas, can we start with you, sir, with a short introduction? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tomas J. I'm the president and founder of United Abolitionists to Stop Human Trafficking, and based here in Central Florida. I have the honor of being one of the founding members with the late Dr. John Garcia, the Center for the Study of Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery. Wickey is now leading in such an amazing way. So great to be with you this morning.
Beautiful. Thank you, Thomas, and hopefully we see you this evening.
Yes,
excellent.
Sir. I will be there.
Lovely. And then if we can bounce to Noel Thomas. Good morning, Noel.
Good morning. I'm Noel Thomas, the CEO and founder of Dark Watch, also the author of the book Dark Traffic on the organized crime behind human trafficking. Great to be here.
Beautiful. Thank you. And last but by no means least, I think all the way from LA this morning, so an early start for Gustavo. Morning, Gustavo.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Gustavo Costa. My focus is in major events, sporting events. I'm a UCF alum. This is, like Alan said, unfortunately I couldn't be there because I just started my second Olympic journey. I'm in the senior leadership with LA 28. And I hope to bring a lot of different perspectives from the major events and impacts and so on. So happy to be here and happy to share some of the expertise with you guys.
Beautiful. Thank you, Gustavo. And I'm going to come back to you very, very quickly. Just before we sort of do a deep dive into the human trafficking, I really want to just ask Mike and Gustavo, as the more event people on the panel, can you just give, so I'm going to start with Mike because he's come a long way, so let's put the pressure on. Can you just give an indication, Mike, of what is it about events that uniquely positions them in a good or bad way for human trafficking? Just a bit of an overview on events.
Do you want the boring answer or the interesting?
We've got a very large audience online, so an interesting.
I'll try and balance it. So,
and then I'll come to Gustavo.
There's obviously sort of obvious features about events that make them really good catalysts and platforms, incubators, to push forward new ideas, right? Global spotlight, everything. But the one thing I always come back to is that there's nothing quite like an event for pushing forward social policy in particular ways, because it has, and this is the boring bit, a really interesting relationship between, and please stay with me, symbolic systems and relational systems. Essentially, vision 10 years before, think of LA, 10 years before, vision, mission, aims, objectives, pound, 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 push, 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 push. The more visionary you are, the more resources you tend to get, the more political will you get. And this essentially, this is the theoretical explanation, but the deep explanation. They essentially are a symbiotic connection. So they just keep going back and forward. And that's why the ambitions are so huge, because you've just got loads of time. And there's actually not that much in the entire world, if you sort of think about it. Existing institutions like the Department of Transport, for example, can do that because it's got a long-term stake. But something like this just brings all these disparate stakeholders together that would just stay in their little universes all together toward a common growth vision. And they just keep going back and forward. So that's essentially practical explanation, but also a little bit of a theoretical explanation as to why they are so powerful.
Okay, thank you. And Gustavo, any thoughts from you've been in events a long time, you've been in big events a long time. Any thoughts for those that aren't event familiar as to their specific role?
Yeah, sure. And just before that, I just want to add that I'm part of the staff board as well with Mike. So I give a little bit of the practitioner side of things and try to bring this different perspective as well. So the way I look at it, in the overall perspective is, there's the good side and the bad side for the major events. And I'm not really just talking about, a sporting event, but also, the big conferences, the big festivals, the big whatever, right? So I think from the good side is that, like Mike was saying, from a practical perspective, is the event is an opportunity, it's a catalyst to bring all of the stakeholders within that place together with a common goal, right? I saw this in Rio, and I'm experiencing this firsthand here in LA, where everybody, the city, the state, the stakeholders, the sponsorships, and everybody is here to deliver another great Olympic game. And that opens the door for other conversations as well, like conversations that we need to have around human trafficking. And what's the impact that the games can produce, of course, in certain areas of expertise, in certain lanes that can last forever. It's not just the legacy of leading the venues or advancing the sport or whatnot, but it's also the social impact that can be generated by this catalyst of a major event coming to town. It could be the Olympic Games, or it could be all the way down to your AAU volleyball tournament down at the ESPN Volleyball Sports, right? So those events tend to bring that. But on the negative side, I think, and this is really what worries me a lot is this is a demand generator, right? So especially if we're thinking about the demand, and me and Alan, we've talked about this a lot, and initiatives of the demand side, how can we tackle that? Unfortunately, major sporting events are, you're in and out of cities, you come from different places, and that opens the door for exploitation and demand generation and so forth. So that's really, I think, maybe from a law enforcement perspective, they're more looking into that, the influx of people coming into the event. But yeah, those are the two different, a good and a bad side of a major event that can cause to think about.
Lovely. Thanks, Gustavo. And if you just lower the camera a little bit, we see your UCF logo even more beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think that helps set the scene. And I think the reason why this is so timely, if you think over the next decade, there's major sporting events in the United States. So it's very timely. We've got the Soccer World Cup, hopefully, in the summer. There's obviously LA 2028. We've got the Rugby World Cup coming, the Women's Soccer World Cup, a whole host of things. So there's a lot going on. So I'm going to start with law enforcement and then come to Olivia as a lived experience. Alan, you've got huge experience in law enforcement. I know that because I keep getting the praise for it. Can you just give us some examples that you've witnessed as the sort of good and bad from a law enforcement point of view? Because I think you've done your Super Bowl or two in the Tampa area. Just your own experiences.
Yeah, I've been to, just to put it in perspective, I think I've been to 5 Super Bowls and never been in the stadium. I've always had to work the outside perimeters of the Super Bowls. One of the things to just kind of start, first of all, just let me say to UCF, to Dr. Wickey, who's a dear friend of mine, to Alan, a friend of mine as well, a big shout out to UCF for taking this on. This conference has been amazing, and taking on issues like this, I think, is just amazing. So a big shout out to you as well. The other thing I want to say, I always say this before I get started because I think it's critical. The most important voice on this panel will be the survivor. The survivors are the lived experience. And so I want to always make sure we honor their voices and make sure they're elevated, and that'll happen today. Let me just mention a couple things because Gustavo had mentioned this earlier during his remarks, talking about the demand-driven side of this. There's a lot of controversy about whether mass-attended big events increase human trafficking. And most of the studies will show that it doesn't increase human trafficking. It doesn't make new trafficking victims in large numbers. So you don't see this big numbers of new trafficking come out of these events. What it does do is it brings in concentrated areas of trafficking into those events because of what Gustavo said, and that is you have a lot of potential buyers with disposable income bringing in a lot of money. And you have these trafficking networks that I'm sure Noah will talk about, these NCOs and TCOs and then locals and on and on and on. You have all of this that will go to these large-scale events because, again, they recognize the potential of buyers with a lot of disposable income, and so trafficking opportunities exist. So they're bringing in their known networks and bringing them in. And I'll give you a case in point. I was at one of our Super Bowls not too long ago over the past, and we were working, so they had the Super Bowl here in the stadium, and about 3 blocks away was something known as the Stripper Bowl. And the Stripper Bowl was being held at the same time as the Super Bowl, and the Stripper Bowl was like a large nightclub on steroids. It was a warehouse that they had rented out. They had brought, women in from all over the place, and they were having this big Stripper Bowl. One of the people that we interacted with, and I'll never forget this, was a young lady. She was 19 years old, who had been brought down from Indianapolis to work this Stripper Bowl. And she talked about her trafficker, her pimp, who had brought her there, the stable that she had come down with, and had been moved from Indiana to Florida for this Super Bowl. Why? Because demand with a large disposable income was going to be there. Now, she was being trafficked in Indianapolis. So it didn't necessarily bring a new victim into the trafficking stream, but what it did is it brought in these networks that came in to quote unquote service the need, which bothers me, terms like that. So when we talk about these large scale events, now I think when you divide the two of them, when you talk about major events, you have like major mass attended events is what I'm calling them. But you also have major events that happen that are like natural disasters. You had the COVID pandemic, which was a major event. You have your big fires, which are major events. Now, they tend to increase trafficking because the exploitation of vulnerabilities that's created by those major events. So you have major natural events that do have a tendency to increase grooming, and what you see from there is that 6 months, a year, 2 years, in some of the studies that have been done, you see an increase in actual trafficking out of those events, where your mass attended major events have a tendency to bring in concentrated increase of human trafficking from known networks that are coming in to supply, again, that demand. So that's kind of what we see from the law enforcement perspective. We see a lot of media that will talk about big spikes, big increase in trafficking around the Super Bowl, but really what we're seeing is not new victims being created. What we're seeing is concentrated law enforcement efforts. We're seeing mass media campaigns. We're seeing big awareness events, which of course brings in reports, brings in this large spike in reports of human trafficking around those big events.
Can I just ask, Alan, have you seen any positive change in how law enforcement interact with event organizers? Or is it, it's the same old story? What sort of evolution?
Without a doubt. And I'm glad you asked that, because I think it was my friend sitting in the back, Doug, who has done amazing work in the law enforcement perspective when it comes to this as well. I think it was him that mentioned it the other day, talking about how when he was working patrol and when I first started, we were just, our operations was go get the prostitutes. Just arrest the prostitutes. They're just back then, before 2012, 2011, when the Florida statute changed, we still had juvenile prostitutes. You could arrest kids for prostitution and charge them with prostitution. Thankfully, we've changed those things in law enforcement. Now, we're not where we need to be, and I think those of us in law enforcement will be the first to admit we've got a ways to go still. But we're a long way from where we used to be, because what we are seeing is that what we call VOI, victim offender intersectionality, where you have a victim that appears to be an offender. We're starting to recognize what trauma does. We're starting to bring that into our investigative tools and looking at trauma care and trauma-informed investigative techniques. So law enforcement has definitely come a long way, and what we're hoping to see as we move even farther forward is that we begin to ask those secondary questions. It's not just what appears in front of us. That's the easy win. But what's going on behind the scene? And we're seeing law enforcement do that. Do we have a ways to go? Yes. And I see the criticism, some of it justified. But I will tell you that we've come a long way from where we used to be, because I see law enforcement now responding in a trauma-informed way in many cases. And that's encouraging to me.
Just quickly to the panel, possibly to Alan. FIFA have been working with the Centre for Sports and Human Rights to create a whole bunch of human rights volunteers. That's been the new novelty between one to another. That was introduced by a guy called Andreas Graf, who was head of human rights at FIFA. How are they working or looking to work with Florida, with Miami, with Atlanta, with all of the host cities, if you know, to help buttress, I guess, the support?
And that's the other encouraging side, is what we're starting to see is these partnerships are being developed early, rather than just at the last minute where, hey, we need to throw a task force together and handle this because we got the Super Bowl coming to Tampa. So, 2 weeks before, let's put a task force. You're way behind the game at that point. What we did in the last one that came to Tampa is that Super Bowl, speaking of specifically, is that we looked at it, and I don't think we did it long enough, to be honest with you, but we looked at it as a 10-day event, not a single event. So we were looking at it 3 days before, all the way to 7 days after, because we knew that now we had COVID hit right before the Tampa Super Bowl. So what we were anticipating to be a 300 or 400,000 persons coming in to Tampa turned out to be 20,000 because of COVID. So the dynamics turned a little bit, but one of the things we recognize is these are not single day events, right? These are multiple day events. The Super Bowl may happen on one day, but the event's much larger than that. When you talk about FIFA and some of those, which are the event itself is multiple days, we've recognized that we can't just come in a day or two before that, stand up a task force and tackle this kind of problem, that the ecosystem has to be built over time. And so you're seeing long-term partnerships between sports entities. The NFL is really good at this. The NBA is good at this now. We're starting to see baseball, MLB. All of these are starting to have these outreaches early, very early, so that we can stand that. Because we recognize the networks that Noel talk about are already planning. They're planning way before we started planning on how to accommodate this, again, large demand-driven, large disposable income event in their minds.
And the FIFA human rights volunteers, are you aware of this group of people that they've installed, and is there any work with Florida that they're doing? Or
very aware of them. I've not worked personally with them.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. And thank you, Mike. So I'm going to come to Olivia for the lived experience, then Gustavo after. I'm going to bounce to you with the sort of FIFA IOC. So just give you a heads up. Olivia, from your experience, what maybe is missing in events understanding the lived experience? And I guess understanding the lived experience and how it impacts the organisation, design, hosting of events, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful, Alan, that you brought up the point that we're not necessarily seeing an increase in new individuals being victimized. It's the people that are already being victimized in the cities that are now being victimized at higher rates more frequently by scarier, more aggressive traffickers, by Johns that have no wife that they're going home to in these cities. So they're, like I said, much more aggressive and a lot scarier. And while I'm speaking as one survivor, doing my best to represent the survivor voices of all lived experience experts, I know that I'm not capturing every survivor idea, but I do think that one of the issues is, while we're talking about increasing awareness of survivors and of those being victimized around these large events, what are we doing after these survivors are being recovered? So the increase in awareness means we're going to be identifying survivors and victims more often, hopefully, and faster and more accurately. What happens then when our systems are already stretched to find beds for women and men, boys and girls that are already being victimized in their cities, but now we're seeing more of them all at once? If we're looking at these events as a 10-day stretch, in 10 days, on a normal 10 days, we might recover 3 survivors of trafficking in a county area. What about when we're recovering 100 survivors that are being victimized in one area? What's happening to those 100 survivors in that really short-term period of time? So I think we need to be aware of what resources we have, and we need to be really realistic also of what resources are available immediately after recovery when we start identifying survivors.
Have you seen any change over time in terms of more support or more proactive energy from the events in listening to the lived experience, or are you coming across the same sort of challenges?
Yes, I do think that there has been an increase in involving survivor voices in the planning and execution and sort of aftermath of large events. And I love that you mentioned the social aspect too, because I think there's this social movement of we're just talking about human trafficking more. We're being more realistic about it, and we're actually listening to survivors telling you the truth about their experiences. And so that's great. But I don't think we have caught up yet with our systems responding to the voices that they're listening to.
Okay, thanks, Olivia. And Gustavo, just building on what Olivia's been saying, you were very involved with Rio. You're now with LA, which is great. I know Adam Burke in LA is really sort of progressive from the tourism side. What experiences have you got with sporting events and sporting organizations integrating and listening to lived experience, be it in Brazil, here, or over on the West Coast?
Yeah, so I believe in what I've seen so far, especially here in LA, and I've been here probably a week or so, is that there is, like what Wickey said, there is a greater preparation. They're not leaving everything to the last moment, right? I think the leadership here understands the impact of the city, understands the problems that LA has, which is completely different than the problems that Florida has. And they are acting on it, trying to use the Olympics as a catalyst to act and solve some of the social problems that they have here. Right? Of course, they're not going to solve it all, but at least they're creating the movement, they're creating the acknowledgement, and they're tackling some of the problems so that we can move the legacy. Now, going back to Rio, pinpoint, doing that comparison, and this is what I say to everybody when I talk to is, I lived through the experience of having a World Cup and 2 years later having the Olympics in Brazil. So we had the 2014 Brazilian World Cup and then 2016 Olympic Games. But what people don't understand or don't recognize and don't know is that those are just the two major anchor events. Everything else that happens within that city, within the country, in the lead up to the event, you know, it's also impacting the marketplace or the city. So in Rio, it was chaotic. You know, there was no preparation whatsoever. You know, the city did not, the government did not care or did not look or did not put the resources into it because it was so strapped in that they either had security on the venues or they would tackle some other issues. So that was just some of the resources that were not really just planned. But now, you know, a couple of years later, now we see a lot of more consciousness of, okay, so let's use the games to create some kind of social impact and tackle those problems. And you know, from an overall perspective, you know, we are going into the perfect storm. That's why my worries me is, you know, it's a perfect storm for human trafficking because of the demand, because of how large the events are, and because of the continuity. Because as we have done with the World Cups, then all the World Championships are going to come to the United States. Right? We're talking every sport are going to bring their World Championship to the United States, which is great from the tourist perspective, from the economical perspective. But again, thinking about the demand side is also a big problem. So from now until 28, 29, we have a lot of work to do.
And Gustavo, just where you started, have you got on any comments between the difference between someone like FIFA, IOC is the organizer, the city, and then the host venues? Do they work seamlessly or, well, obviously not in Brazil based on your comments, but to what extent do you see differences between the different layers? Because they're all integral to a successful event, but obviously have very, very different roles.
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference is the footprint, right? So if we look at FIFA, FIFA is looking at 3 countries, right? So they have a much broader vision. They have a narrow vision as far as sports, it's just one. I have a broader vision as far as footprint because they are dealing with multiple major cities, right? So, and I think from a FIFA perspective, they are evolving, they are moving this thing, some of the issues forward, but they have very little effectiveness because they are so wide as far as footprint, right? You can only touch some of the city's leaderships here and there because you're really stretched as far as resources, right? But LA, for example, it's a completely different tackling some of those issues. So I think from the IFC perspective, yes, they are also looking at evolving this thing, the social impact and the legacy for that, but it's much more narrow, it's much more direct because of the footprint is concentrated in just one place.
Beautiful. Thanks, Gustavo. That helps set up the scene, maybe for a slightly more local angle. So I'm going to come to Jody from the community advocacy level. What have you seen over the years with the changing dynamic with events in a sort of positive or negative light?
So I think there's been a lot in the positive column. There's been a lot more preparation, as Alan had spoke about. There's been a lot more involvement, as Gustavo has alluded to, from not only law enforcement or service providers, but also those hosting these events for the cities themselves. I think we've come a long way in the positive when it comes to awareness. So now we're standing up great awareness campaigns around these events. I think something that another place where we've had a lot of positive strides is collaboration across the board, across NGOs, across law enforcement. It's an all hands on deck approach that we've experienced in all of the events we've been able to collaborate on. And that's been a beautiful win in a lot of ways. Where we need to make more strides, and Olivia had talked about it before, is in the aftermath, right? So we can create an abundance of awareness, and that's a beautiful thing, and it leads to identification. But what after identification? Sometimes we can actually do more harm when we do recovery and identification without any after plan. Because what you do is you create an opportunity for that survivor to choose exit, but if they choose exit without resources, they're going to fall back into exploitation, and that is going to have a lot more consequences from that trafficker. And so we need to do a better job. I'm sitting here as everyone's talking, and one thing that comes up often is the economic boom that happens during these events. How much of that is actually dedicated to services when survivors are recovered? That's my question. There's no flow of services there. And so we need to figure out, as we're having these conversations long term, with that economic boost, how are we allocating safe housing for survivors afterwards, and in a way that leads them to the next step of their recovery, right? And so I do think that we have a long way to go in the aftermath. We always say at One More Child, and with so many other NGOs that we partner with here in Florida, we don't care about, we care about the awareness. We partake in the press conferences, right? Those are really fun to attend. What about afterwards, right? Who's tending to these survivors afterwards? That's really what's on our heart, and really a big area of improvement when it comes to events.
Yeah. Thanks, Jody. And I'm going to come to Alan and then Thomas as well, because he's put your hand up, so perfect timing, Thomas. One of the criticisms of events, it's the circus mentality. They come, they perform, they go, they move on to the next stop. So maybe Thomas first. What have you seen, Thomas, in this area of sort of sustained activity once the circus has moved on?
Yes, I just want to reiterate what Jody and Olivia said today. I had the privilege of being a part of the first Super Bowl outreach against human trafficking in 2009 in Tampa, Florida, with the FBI, Greg Christopher, and we've come a long way since that time. But everything that's being stated today from the panel is so true and still relevant. We could rescue 1,000,
She's next, Thomas.
in these efforts,
Yeah.
and we'll be needing more.
Yeah, lovely. No, thank you, Thomas. And just before I come to Sarah, Alan, have you seen any change in the law enforcement recognizing once the circus is left, the problem doesn't necessarily go away? Because and then I'll come to Sarah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's probably the better answer there, because we've seen, and I'm just not gonna add to what's been said, because I totally 100% agree that we need to be concerned with the aftermath. What happens then, and then what, and then what? And law enforcement needs to have a hand in that as well, because if we're doing these operations and we're not reaching out to NGOs and to our partners who are taking care of direct services and the aftermath of what happens, we are doing a disservice by not having that as part of our operational planning. So it's a full stop, yes. What I will say, in addition to that, is that I don't think we comprehend how much the need is to dismantle the organizational apparatus that drives human trafficking. So oftentimes we see a pimp and a prostituted person as the organization, but there is an ecosystem around that you take out either one of those and the ecosystem around it just plugs a new person in. So we've not made real change by just concentrating on one activity. I'll give you a case in point. So I took down one of our strip clubs in my county, and when we took down the strip club and we recovered one of the persons there that was being trafficked in this strip club and arrested the trafficker that was operating them in that strip club, which strip clubs are notorious operations for human trafficking, period. And so we took that down. And I was doing the interview. It was interesting as we began to discover, just in that small Pasco County strip club, just a strip club on the south side of our county that most people drive by on US 19 all times of the day. But do you know that inside there, the bar back was keeping the money for the VIP. There was a VIP attendant that was getting a cut of the money that was being made in the VIP room by the victim who was being abused and exploited. You had the taxi driver that gets a cut for getting buyers to come from the hotel to the strip club and talks to them when he's taking them from the airport to the hotel. Hey, if you need some fun, I got a great place to take you. He also had a weekend gig going on where he could take a van and go to Orlando when they're having big events because they didn't have enough girls to service everybody. So he would drive the van to Orlando, and he got $20 a head for everybody he could bring in from Orlando, packed them in a van, because the more people he could put in the van, you have a 15-passenger van, he's put 30 people in there. They're crowded in unsafe conditions, getting them there because he's getting $20 a head. And this is the kind of apparatus that's around this. So if you take out the trafficker from that situation, all of this other ecosystem that's operating on the outside of this is continuing to work. Then you magnify that by what Noel deals with, and that's from the national criminal organization side or the transnational criminal organization side or the dark money that's behind the IMBs. These apparatuses are going to have to be attacked, and then we have to ask the question, and then what? You dismantle that, and then what? So this and then what, as you mentioned, Alan, is a critical component to how we deal with this.
Great. Thanks, Alan. Sarah. Okay, that was a powerful comment from Alan there. How do you approach the funding perspective? How do you sort of evaluate what may work, what may not, bearing in mind the complexity?
It's a fascinating question, and it's one that I think everybody wrangles with because you have this tremendous collaboration, whether it is law enforcement, service providers, survivor mentors, other NGOs, and law enforcement, as we just mentioned. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to the funding. Because you can have this tremendous collaboration of all these experts and great work being done at these massive events. However, at the end of the day, it all comes down to the funding. And, you know, we're unique in Florida, and really, my partner Tony Azinger and I created the Florida Human Trafficking Victims Fund because what we had learned was that law enforcement needed more money to be able to identify, rescue, but in large part stabilize victims after a recovery. You heard that time and time again from the sheriffs that they have an operation that ended up being so much larger than they had anticipated. It was almost like casting a net into a body of water full of it, just always greater than what was anticipated and what was therefore budgeted for. And so what we've been able to do with the Victims Fund is be able to support victims once they've been recovered and once they're with law enforcement to be able to get a One More Child in or another service provider with survivor mentors to be able to work with the victims, talk to them about what's occurring and what's available to them. And a piece of that stabilization funding, what we found a great need was for after. There isn't a hotel room. Or there isn't a hotel room for somebody who has a dog and all she has in her life is this dog, right? There isn't money for transportation. There isn't money for food. Tomas and I, with United Abolitionists, we've talked about this so much as well, in really bringing what is necessary to help stabilize victims in these really, really difficult moments, which are just a catalyst in the future to their life. They can either go back or they know that there is some safety and some comfort to moving forward. We are going to continue in our second year of the fund of really honing in and talking about the stabilization piece. We do things really uniquely here in Florida, and this happens to be one of the first private-public partnerships. We love the private-public partnership model, where you really have centralized directed funds. So we would love to talk to other states about how to do this because it's not rocket science, really. It's really just getting a group of people together who really care deeply about the issue. And frankly, without Alan and Jody and Tomas, without them, we wouldn't really have the vision of our Victims Fund. So it's really been working very well in Florida, and we'd love to help share how to do this in other states and other places, particularly where a lot of these large-scale events will be happening.
So thank you. Yeah, it's not easy, is it?
No.
Michael, you're going to say a couple of words.
Given the intensification of everything in and around events, do you find that some of them, do you get any additional funding and revenue from these events and sort of acknowledging their responsibility to attend to the intensification problem? And if not, what should they do about it? Tying that into the contractual mandates that a host city signs to host these things, is that a way in which you overcome perhaps some of the funding question?
I think that Alan and Tomas could speak more closely to that, having been so involved with the Super Bowls for such a long time. But there is certainly a community aspect that comes into it. And going to these large-scale events, you really need to have a centralized fund that is prepared before, during, and that continues afterwards, not just for the time. They could certainly speak to, and there's a lot of great funding streams, and there have been for all of these events. But there's a lot that I think can be done on the local side, because this is not a political issue. This crosses everything, and everybody cares about this. And I don't know that there isn't a soul that doesn't want to see the end to human trafficking in their communities and everywhere, and anybody who does not have a heart for victims. So I think that there's always a lot out there. You know, like people will say, well, I never gave to this cause because I was never asked. Yeah. You have to ask. And if you take some time, and I'd love to help people at some point in time, there's so many different ways to ask and so many different
And I'm just going to address this in a very controversial way. So this is not from UCF. So let me just be the disclaimer out there. This is from
Off the street.
this is from Alan Wilkett. So in answer to your question, like the NFL particularly, they bring in a bucket of money. Now, we would always argue, is it enough? But they award a certain dollar amount to bring in an awareness efforts around the Super Bowl. And organizations will come in, and national organizations will come in, and they're great organizations, so I am not slamming them. Tomas mentioned earlier, it's a penalty, and some of the others will come in and they come in and they do this really large scale awareness event around the event. But the problem with it is, the problem that I see with it is that once the Super Bowl leaves, they leave. And so the money that was put into the community with the billboards and all the kind of stuff, billboards come down, they turn the lights off in their rented offices and they leave and they go to the next event. They're doing a great work. So this is not a slam on them. But what I'm seeing is, what I think we need is what Sarah's talking about. And that is, how do we get the money into the local organizations that when the Super Bowl turns the lights off and Raymond James goes dark, and the Super Bowl is gone, and 7 days later the people are out of there. These organizations are having to still deal with the recoveries that happened during the Super Bowl because they don't leave with it's a penalty, and they don't leave with some of the other national organizations that came in. They don't take the victims with them. They're still there in these direct service providers who are in the local area. So what we need is a kind of a change, I think, in the model so that the local organizations are the ones who are receiving the funding that's coming in. And I do believe that these large-scale organizational event planners have a responsibility to make sure that money stays in the local community to take care of the local survivors and the local problems that have been dealt with while that event was there. That's going to be controversial, but it's my view.
I'm just going to bounce to Jody,
Sure.
then Gustavo, then Mike, and Thomas is applauding. So Alan, you've done something right this morning. Okay.
Yeah, and mine's going to be a verbal applause to Alan, because what we need to realize is awareness and service delivery are two very different things. It's like doing an awareness campaign for cancer versus putting money into the cure, right? Two very, very different things. And when Olivia and her teams and teams of all NGOs, Flight Center, all NGOs across the board are sitting across from that survivor and saying, we can help you. What that has to mean is a complete way out, because when you sit across from a survivor of trafficking, what you're asking them to do is you're asking them to choose the hard path out. You're asking them to choose uncertainty, poverty. You're asking them to do these things because what that trafficker has built for them is dependency, livelihood, not one we would have chose, but that's what they've built. So we're talking about more than hotels. When One More Child comes with an advocate or a survivor mentor clinician, what we are committed to do is, yes, work with Tomas and United Abolitionists. I mean, the collaboration here in Central Florida is the best I've ever seen, and we work all over. But he will help secure the hotels for a couple days, and then we're calling shelters, we're calling safe homes. We are committed to walking beside that survivor the entire exit out, and that requires resources. That requires more than billboards, and that's what we need to be asking these event holders to be infusing money into when they come into our cities and when they hold these large-scale events.
Thanks, Jody. And just before coming to you, Gustavo, if anyone was here yesterday, what's the most impressive thing in this region? So the mayor of Orange County gave a talk yesterday, and we had Sheriff Mina. So you just know at all levels that there's connection, which is great. Gustavo, and then Mike.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. I mean, this conversation is music to my ears because those are some of the things that I've been talking about for a long time. Just to give you guys some perspectives from the West Coast of Los Angeles, we have a fund that's dedicated to help the social impact that's north of $150 million just from the LA 28 organization. And I think, and me and Tomas, we've discussed this a lot, is, there are ways to generate more funds, and I think the local organizations, specifically when we talked about tourism and sports tourism, that those organizations can help generate those funds and keep those funds locally, as they do to market out Orlando or to promote a youth sporting event. The funds are there. It's just how can we, as a collective, can create that consciousness and create the necessity of just split the pie a little bit better so we can do the aftermath. We can take care of the victims after everything is gone and we're left with another big problem. So there are ways. We've been talking with the leagues on the high level, but also the conversation at the city and county level with the tourism organizations needs to happen as well.
Thank you, Gustavo.
I only look at it from that sort of event owner level, sort of what's their mentality, what's their determinants of the decision making, how do they award money and that sort of thing. And essentially it's sort of split into two. One is what we've seen over the years is that there's a deeper sense of social sustainability, all the reform that we've seen, huge amounts of agendas in social sustainability. We've seen the revisal of ISO 2012-1:2024, which is updated by for the Paris Olympics. That is the international standard for sustainable event management. That is where the social sustainability and human trafficking portion is enshrined in the international standard. That's new as of 2024. It shows a huge amount of focus around ESG reporting. The ESG reporting is becoming more detailed, a lot more checklists, and there's nothing wrong with checklists as long as the things that's on the checklist are good, and there's more and more. You live off checklists, not yeah. So that's really, really good. The big agenda change is going to be not now in the next 10 years. It's going to be in the next sort of 10, 20, 30 years, whereby social sustainability is going to be a bid criteria for these things. In order to win, let's say Orlando was thinking about, I think, bidding for the Olympics or FIFA World Cup or something, right?
Why not?
When I forgot what his name is. What's his name? Who runs it? Jason Segel. Thinks about that and brings people together. What do I need to have? It's not infrastructure, it's not roads, it's not venues, it's nothing about that. It's only going to be about social sustainability. And the reason for that is because all the institutions that we're talking about now are all primarily European, and they're all finding ways to change the bid criteria away from economics to social, to ensure that certain regions of the world that are now dominating major events, Middle East, will likely not be able to attend to these issues. So we're seeing a subtle bid change. The entire fabric, the system, the structure of the entire industry is changing toward all the things that we all care about. So I think it's moving in the right direction. It's about convincing, like Gustavo said, the right people who have the purse strings, I guess.
Thanks, Mike. And some points I think we'll come back to a little bit later. But I want to switch to Jessica and then Thomas, the themes of education, and then a point that Mike just mentioned, Thomas, cultural sensitivity and the cultural dynamic of this region. And then I'm going to jump to AI.
Yeah.
So, Jessica, for you, this is obviously very complicated. There's multiple levels. I always think I know this stuff, but then I realize, no, I don't. So I've learned stuff this morning. How do you educate the next generation on all this ecosystem, as Alan mentioned? It's complicated.
It is complicated, and it takes a village, of which I agree that Central Florida is an anomaly and an amazing, that how collaborative we all get to work together. And so we believe that. And so we've been looking at it really from a 10,000 square view, right? 10,000 foot view. Let's look at it granularly, and let's look at how we can make actual differences through education and outreach. So we have an organization called Meeting Professionals International. We have NACE, National Association for Catering and Events, PCMA. We have all these great ILEA, IMAX, IAPA, all these great organizations, right? All the alphabet soup. We can start with them and their partnership in education, right? So these meeting planners, in the very first step, what can they do to increase awareness before you even set foot in our city? Is through Cvent, Ticketmaster, all the major ticketing platforms. Needs to be mandated that in our community, we do not accept human trafficking. If you see an ad such as this could be possible trafficking. If you come here to purchase another human being, Florida Statute 797.006 will arrest you. End of story. And that needs to be standardized across every single platform, all of the ticketing, all of the major organizers, and I believe our students that are currently in the hospitality and tourism program here at our great college are going to do that. They are learning about this, they're understanding, they're educated to identify and report, and even better is that they feel it in their soul. We are creating servant leaders. And to your point, the social aspect, the CSR behind it is this next generation. And so if we continue to just say, well, we're going to advertise and we're going to spread awareness, but people can look away. People can stare off into the other side of the billboard. They can turn the TV off. They can flip past an ad. But when you're asking them, when they're on the registration part, and they say they have to accept and agree with all of these things, and then sending reminders about that. So that's on the granular level. And then what can we do as educators for the community? And it's things like this, panels, having student groups. If you have young people in your organization, or if you're in academia, higher education, engage in your students for these social justice issues. We have our students, the Knights of the Realm. These are amazing students that advance all education outreach for our student population, including high schools. So it starts really at the beginning, and then you need help, right? We need help and we need resources. And if you don't make the ask, they won't give it to you. You're right. So luckily, we made the ask. We traveled up to Tallahassee and made the ask, and they gave us some funding for the year, a non-recurring, so we're very grateful for that. Thank you, Tallahassee. Well done. We'll look for the next one, but that is all for the whole year, and so what little bit we get. And I want to ask Gustavo, I got a couple more points, but what that $150 million, what can they allocate that to? And to Olivia and Jody's point, is it aftercare services, which is what we need. So that $150 million sounds really blingy and exciting, but when we get down to the nuts and bolts of it, what is it supporting? And so I look forward to hearing that. And then lastly, we have some projects we're working on through the center. One of them is called Buyer Beware, and I'm working on it with my friend Alan Wilkett down here, David Metcalf from IST, and we're looking at utilizing technology, and Noel Thomas from Dark Watch is our partner, the amazing Noel, of combating buyers online. So we're building a 3-part program that if you go online and you start to search for sex trafficking to purchase another human being online, a firewall will pop up. And will say, you are about to enter into human trafficking, Florida statute, blah, blah. If you go past this, we are now monitoring you. We're monitoring your movements. If they don't go past it and we've intercepted them, right, or redirected them, then it will go to our website to give information and link to some of our partners like the EPIC Project and different educational support. If they go past that firewall, we're now monitoring them, kind of like a Crime Stoppers tip. And then it gets fed all the way into a SHIELD app, which is an app for law enforcement only, a closed loop app that will then give them the information to follow up on that tip. Along the way, our AI model, we call them the AI hunter bots. We created this really good logo, it's fantastic.
Scary.
It's very scary. And along the way, these AI hunter bots are gathering information specific to writing the arrest warrant and specific to writing the warrant to the judge and the county of which they will submit it to. So we're training our AI model to be so smart that in the state of Florida, it will identify where they're at, what judge it's going to set to, and it will prepare that warrant in less than 40 minutes, which normally takes a person, an officer, up to 2 days to do. So all of this technology, this education, again, that trafficking triangle we talk about, trafficker, victim, buyer, we're trying to slow that demand. And imagine all the people that we stopped by that firewall. They said, whoa, I didn't know I was going into trafficking. I thought I was just going to have a good time tonight, you know? I didn't know what this was. Those people, those hopefully 30,000 people we redirected will go to our case. Florida is open for business and closed for trafficking, right? And so that, all of these educational efforts come together, and it doesn't work in a silo. We have to be collaborative. We have Dark Watch, which is Noel here, and we have, the Institute for Simulation and Training. We have Blue Fusion, and then we work with law enforcement to educate us on the warrants, what state's attorney's office, survivors. We have survivor panels to inform us of all of this so that we're successful. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but it's really exciting what we're getting to do in the next year.
No, thanks, Jessica. And I have to apologize, Thomas, because really, based on what Jessica said, I have to bounce to Noel on the AI side. So I'm going to come back to Thomas and Olivia on the cultural community dynamic. But can we dive into you, Thomas? Noel, and expand on the AI and tech's role in essentially changing the agenda for the better.
Absolutely. So we can all agree that live events should be safer and that they are ground zero for this type of activity. We saw that with the Mavericks game where that child was kidnapped and then trafficked there. And we've known this from the Super Bowl and these other sporting events, the results. The challenge and the problem right now is that there isn't a way to build a grid between law enforcement, academia, first responders, advocacy groups, and NGOs. And what happens is a lot of these events go undetected. And as Alan was pointing out, this is big business for transnational organized crime, $250 billion a year, as we know. And the way to get ahead of this is by following this upstream, by following the money and the online activity as Dr. Byrd laid out, is that we have to get proactive, and then we have to create a way that these different groups working on it can communicate and share this intelligence. And so what we're building is that grid, an early warning system, if you will, to detect it at payments, at the payments level, at the reservation level, on the geospatial level, knowing exactly where the hotspots are so you can proactively put resources. And that's the beauty of technology, whether it's our technology or other technologies like the ones that UCF are creating, is that the technology provides a multiplier effect for everyone in the counter-trafficking movement and for those that are on the front lines to disrupt this before the crime actually happens and then disrupts the flow of money. Ideally, if we can make it really hard for traffickers to conduct business, we joke, you know, we'd love to push them into the coupon fraud business instead of exploiting human individuals, because it's so hard to do that. And we win by breaking down the business economics and the business of human trafficking.
And Noel, can I just ask, obviously AI is sort of flavor of the month at the moment because there's just so much energy going on. Is it just you, or are there other groups in the sort of AI community, the tech community, attacking this thing? Because obviously, you know, we tend to see what the mainstream media project, but what's really going on in this space?
Well, absolutely. We're seeing AI used and leveraged in new ways to identify corruption, to mine large data sets online. And UCF really is one of the leaders from their Meta Labs and the work that Dr. Byrd is doing in utilizing AI on the front lines to really prevent human trafficking from happening. But if we all think about the impacts that OpenAI and ChatGPT has had in our day-to-day work, whether that's preparing an email or putting a proposal together, it's just exponential. And one of the challenges that we faced when I was on the state side of Florida, on the government side, or even on this side that I've seen, is that the problem of human trafficking is so large, but it's often under-resourced. There's never enough funding. There's never enough people. And this is the unfair advantage that we as the counter-trafficking movement as a whole have, is now we can start to leverage these tools that can be used for evil, but they can also be used for good. Yeah. And if you think about it, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack when Alan is talking about looking online, or Dr. Byrd. And if you're trying to manually do that as an analyst or a detective, it takes an incredible amount of time. So there's some very functional ways in which we can all use AI, not just our tools, but publicly available and free tools out there to speed up this process, which would have taken years or maybe even a lifetime of investigation. We can now do that in seconds with tools like OpenAI, ChatGPT, and using them for good.
Excellent. Thanks, Noel. I'm going to take it back to the local level. And this is really for Tomas and Olivia. If you just think of the area where we are now in Central Florida, part of the joy living here, it's so diverse. Yeah. It's so diverse, and it gets more diverse by the day, which I really enjoy. It's fun. Tomas, how does that diversity complicate or help the agenda? Because, you know, you walk around Orlando, there's Spanish, there's Portuguese, there's English, there's Creole. You know, how does that help or hinder your efforts? And then I'll come to Olivia.
Yes, and just to kind of piggyback too on the educational piece that Dr. Wickey started saying is that one of my mentors, mine and Gustavo's, Dr. Richard Lapchick, always talks about the power of sport, right? And so this is so amazing, right? Just having this panel and what a huge impact, right, it makes in our community, in our nation, and across the world because of the power of sport. And saying that our efforts and everything that I've even been able to contribute in education, right, which will include the diversity, is because of that experience I had at the Super Bowl in 2009. That made me realize that the hospitality, hotel and lodging industry needed to be educated because these bad actors are coming into our cities and using, right, staying at the hotels, going to the different venues. And so that was really the seed that was planted in 2009 to begin to advocate, even in the state of Florida, that we needed to educate our hospitality, hotel, and lodging industry, which we had the privilege of House Bill 851, and Alan and I helped write that first training for the state under that statute. And so part of that education then came when I met in 2009 Dr. Wickey, what we've done at the Rosen College of Hospitality Management, building the curriculum for the students, and building a curriculum for the hospitality and hotel industry here in our own community and beyond. And that part of that was looking at that cultural competency, right? With Orlando being so diverse, right? We are almost half Spanish speaking or from a Latino country. Our Creole population, our Portuguese friends from Brazil, and just all the different communities that are represented here is that's why we now have the Multicultural Coalition on Human Trafficking with the City of Orlando. Okay. But also, one of the big aspects was when Orlando was bidding through who you mentioned, Jason Siegel, and the Greater Orlando Sports Commission for the FIFA games, I was a part of that Human Rights Committee. And one of the things that kept being mentioned by the FIFA executives that they noticed how prepared Orlando was, how so much education had happened, how the universities, the task force, the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force, and other stakeholders. You keep hearing today about the power of collaboration here in Central Florida. That is very true. That the FIFA executives, in our final meeting with them, many of the questions went to that collaboration and to the education efforts that have occurred because of this incredible community we have.
Thanks, Thomas. And Olivia, from a lived experience point of view, how do you see the cultural dynamic does it add an extra level of complexity, or does it actually help? And after Olivia, I'm going to open up to the audience for a few questions. So Jeannie, front row, be ready, okay? Yes, Olivia.
Yeah, the cultural diversity absolutely complicates things. It's a beautiful thing, but it's a challenging thing, because if we believe that survivors deserve individualized services, that means that they deserve services that are sensitive to their linguistic identity, cultural identity, spiritual identity. And so it's not just that we need the providers speaking English that are ready for the English-speaking survivors that we're identifying, but also those that don't speak English or are not identified with a specific faith identity. Those people deserve a real human being that's in our community that speaks their language, that understands all the diversity and complexities of their entire existence to that point, and can be sensitive in helping them along the healing process. Because as Jody said, when we're thinking about supporting survivors, that means we're committed to the long haul journey. And the long haul journey does not mean just involving a translation service for the phone call at crisis. It means that they're connected then to long-term therapy with a provider that speaks their language, and connected to a spiritual advisor that can assist them through the spiritual healing also.
Okay, thank you. I've got many questions to go, but I'm very conscious. It'd be nice to get a little bit of engagement from the audience, not looking at anyone in particular. But would anybody like to raise a question? We've had real diversity this morning. This has been excellent. Anybody, any questions? I've got to watch. Thank you.
Yeah, so earlier when you guys were, I think Alan and Jody were talking about the need for once the survivors have been rescued out of that situation, and then the need for the financial support that goes into the direct care services. And then Dr. Wickey, you were talking about, sorry, follow me here, I'll get to my point. You were mentioning that you're working towards building with those organizations that do the major events to bring in that system that would make them say, okay, I approve, or like, I agree that this will be a non-human trafficking. So have you considered like building a proposal that would like deal with the people who are selling tickets to propose, okay, well, let's do an increase in revenue, so 10%, 15% of this, whatever, can go directly towards those direct care services after each event?
Hold on. No, I took it. Yeah, fine.
Good to see you. Good to see you. And you have really brilliant ideas. Yesterday you gave me brilliant ideas. And yes, actually, that is a great idea. And build it into the proposal. I know Dr. Ham Jeannie is part of MPI, and it can be a conversation overall, because I agree we need to tap into them and that they can help to fund some of this outreach education support for post-event. Additionally, and I say this out there to our amazing Orlando community, we have a huge tourism development tax. Human trafficking is a public health crisis. It is a public health crisis, and if we want to keep our beautiful city and community safe, we need to invest in that. And so I'm looking at you all out there who are watching in the virtual world, that we have an opportunity to lead the way in Central Florida by utilizing some of that money to support exactly what is missing. And right now, we support all of the great community, to your point, right, to add this into the proposal. And so we have the opportunity to tap in to all those millions and millions and millions of dollars that gets funded through our tourism development tax in Orange County and Osceola County. So brilliant, I love it. What was your other question? Was it for something else? That was it? Thank you.
I just want to add on and just give acknowledgement to, first off, great question. And I think, yes, ticket holders, they obviously have the money to attend, sometimes these very expensive events to attend, but also the businesses, the corporations, everyone that is benefiting off the revenue. And to acknowledge what Sarah and Ms. Tony Azing are doing with the Florida Human Trafficking Victims Fund, that public-private partnership that she had acknowledged is so powerful. We need buy-in from those businesses, from those corporations that are going to benefit so greatly to partner with things like the Florida Human Trafficking Victims Fund to funnel those fundings in so that they can go into the long-term recovery. As Olivia had mentioned earlier, yes, we want a speaker of the language of origin for that survivor, but we've made great strides. I mean, One More Child does have translation services available at the point of recovery to get to the next step, and then we're searching for that native speaker after, if we can identify one, because of partnerships like the Florida Human Trafficking Victims Fund that's providing money for those services. So again, it all goes back to collaboration and partnerships, but what I would really want to hang my hat on are the businesses that are benefiting greatly during those events, investing back into the care of survivors after the fact.
Thank you. Gustavo, did you want to respond just before I go back for another question?
Yeah, real quick, so add on that, like the ticketing point is a great opportunity. Also the tourism fund, like Dr. Wickey said, but also let's not forget that especially if you're looking at the sporting events, the city is bidding to bring the events into Orlando, for example. So if we think about the business perspective, the city is paying a rights holder to bring the event here. So I believe, and this is again, I'm not talking about UCF, it's my own belief that the city must have specific requirements that the rights holder needs to meet in order to have an event in Orlando, for example. And that includes, all the human trafficking efforts and whatnot, and also other social impacts as well. But if we take that road, that could also help a lot to increase the funds and provide the resources that the movement needs to tackle this problem.
Thanks.
And fantastic idea. Fantastic idea. So I buy into that. I think that's great. Let's attach something to ticket sales. I love where Jody goes with this, and that is the businesses that are profiting from these events should be giving back to the dark side that happens when these events happen, as we're talking about today. But I couldn't remain, and I should remain silent. I've said that to many people. You have the right to remain silent, and I should be taking my own advice here, but I can't. Because let me tell you, one demographic that needs to be paying for this is the buyer. The buyers who are buying these human beings need to be penalized, not just with a jail sentence, and I'm all for that. I'm all for whatever those penalties may be. But in addition to that, we need to be seizing their assets. We need to be taking the fruits of their frolicking, and we need to be making the buyer pay for the trauma that they've inflicted on these victims. Because in my view, they're equally culpable to the trafficker for the trauma that they're inflicting on these victims. So make the buyers pay.
Thanks, Alan. So no pressure. One great question. Jeannie, could you be my runner? To the lady at the back.
Okay.
There's a lady at the back. The question.
Oh, okay.
Could you be the runner? Oh. I come in two places at once.
I was going to ask a question
Jeannie's
too.
a very good runner. Thank you, Jeannie.
No, I was going to ask a question too, but after her.
Okay.
Do you want to go first? Okay. So I'm with a national nonprofit organization, and I know we want to do some awareness around the FIFA World Cup. So what would be your recommendations for those national nonprofits that want to, do something good, but in a good way? Do you have any advice for that?
It's probably worth saying that my wife is the campaign director for It's a Penalty. So it's worth just saying that.
Yes, but she's not on the panel.
She's not on the panel, so I'll channel my inner Naomi. And so one thing that's been quite interesting about their campaigns for FIFA is that they're working across 15, 16 cities. They're convening, and they're using their convening power. I think that's their strength, right? I think in one sense you could argue that they're, in a sense, to your point, Alan, sort of parasitic. Sort of they come in, they take a little bit of the money that could have been supporting services in the long term, but take that out for awareness campaigns. I see them as a convener of people that bridge together everyone and have the collective power. So my point is, don't try and do something that's already there. Like that, everyone's just replicating so much work over and over again, and you just like, actually, you would have been much stronger together. Like Mark Carney's point at Davos, did you, about the sort of small, middle-sized countries, you have to collectively come together. You don't want it to be bilateral. You need it to be multilateral between. You're much more powerful. And I think that one of the bugbears of It's a Penalty, because I hear it over the dinner table, it is ultimately that everyone's just trying to do the same sort of thing, and you're stronger together. And collectively, you can lobby for more money together as well. And they're working with Dallas Airport and all the airports, and with the airports, you can then lobby for bigger funding. So essentially, Dallas Airport's allowing them to get a big screen in NYC, in and around Times Square. And I don't know, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger if you're together. I think if you try and do it on your own, you're just going to be piss in the air or something, whatever you want to say.
And I'm just going to go back to Gustavo, and then back to Jeannie, and then Gustavo.
Yeah, real quick, I have a more practical, actionable item. I think for Florida specific, I think the movement needs to get together, drive down south on the Turnpike, go down to Miami, knock at the FIFA headquarters, and just say, hey, we are here. We need to work together on this. How can we do it? They are in the state. So there's a great opportunity to, as a whole, like Mike said, with ideas, with action points, just drive down to Miami and let's knock on the doors.
Lovely. Thank you, Gustavo.
Just really quickly on Naomi told me to say this. The Miami Women's Dade Fund is a really great example, as well as all the work that's been done in this room, Tomas, etc., and the center. A really good illustration of like hundreds of organizations and individuals coming together, and they have a huge fund as well. So maybe there's these sorts of funds that you can tap into as well.
Thank you. Jeannie? Okay, the next question, lovely, thank you.
Hi, good morning. My name is Diana Mejia. I am CEO of New Path, organization who provides service to survivors of domestic violence and sexual abuse as a cultural specific service that we provide for Latinas community. So I'm so grateful to be here today and listening these beautiful panelists. I would like to ask you how we can help as a community to prevent human trafficking. So in my organization, we listen in women and family who's victims of sexual trafficking. So every day we have that issue in our community. It's important to us come together and help those families, like Tomas was saying. We need more resources. We have some funding for education and prevention and housing for family, but I see that as an organization, everyone needs to work together for more funding for after recovery trauma specific. So how we can become and work together and how we can collaborate to stop and prevent sexual trafficking. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, nice to see you. I got to meet you earlier. Thank you for that great question. And for the post recovery, I'll defer to Jody, to Olivia. But for education, it starts before 11 years old. So we work with an organization called Paving the Way Foundation and Jan Edwards. And so they create age-appropriate education for the K through 12. But the biggest barrier of getting them into these local schools are the parents, because they're not educated either. And so we need education for parents. We need specific education, which Jen does a great job. And so I will give you her number so you all can collaborate. But if they're at home or in their community being groomed and trafficked as early as 11, 5, 7, we have to educate them at the school. In Central Florida, current data states that 46% of trafficking is familial. And according to the Metropolitan Bureau of Investigation arrest records over 4 years, they're trafficked within 8 miles of their home by their families in their own communities. And then they're going to school every day. So we as a community, I also sit on the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force with Olivia. We have to all stand together. And I like Gustavo's idea of all of us go like holding hands, like Red Rover, let's go down to FIFA, right? The same for Tallahassee. We got to go up there. But education, because a lot of times, and we heard this yesterday on this beautiful panel we had, was that I didn't realize what I was going through was this. And so we need to educate, and that's the bottom line, is education and age appropriate, and education for parents. The next thing, and we don't have this right now, I'm working with Tomas and Jan, we need social media education. Grooming is happening online. We talked about this a lot yesterday. Grooming is happening immediately when you get that instant message in your Instagram or Facebook, hey, beautiful. That's them trying to automatically groom you, right? And so it happens very fast. Within 97 seconds, a trafficker can identify and connect with you. And then it can take as little as 20 minutes to make a connection to where you actually are now communicating back and forth. It is their number one job, is to groom and to sell someone else. So education on social media, what social media apps are looking like. In the gaming systems, education to understand that if someone is talking to you on the gaming and they asking you to leave the game chat and go to another chat so your parents can't hear, that's a signal. If you're online gaming with another 11-year-old boy or a 14-year-old boy, and they send you 60 coins for your game, no other 14-year-old boy is going to send you 60 coins. That's an adult. But the parents don't know this. The children don't know this. So on the very bottom level, we need structured education at the K through 12, and then for the parents in social media. And it should be actively out there, just like the It's a Penalty campaign and all these things. And then lastly, because I'm a bit of the soapbox here, the organizations that allow CSAM to come across their platforms, social media, different websites, need to be held accountable and prosecuted and asset seizure for it. If you allow on your social media platform for a child sexual material to go out, and even if it's for 1 second, 1 minute, 1 day, 1 year, you need to be prosecuted for that. And that has to come from the federal level, because what's happening right now is really, 13 million views of children pornography under the age of 12 happen every single minute. And that's in the United States of America. Tim Tebow told us that. And so I think on the level, it's education, education, education. Hope that answered Dr. Mejia.
And just before we go to the next question, people may or may not be aware, you could actually be more extreme than that.
Yeah.
So Australia has now banned social media for children 16 and under. The United Kingdom have started the process. I put money on it will happen within the year. So because there isn't action by the companies, because there isn't action by the federal government here, other countries, they're taking a far more extreme approach.
Florida has the same law. Under age 16, social media is not allowed in Florida, right?
It's not in the schools.
Well, with some parental consent, now you have to have parental consent under 15. It was House Bill 1 last year. So it was big, one of the governor's big pushes, which is very nice. Can I just speak a bit to the service
Yes,
provider?
certainly, and then
one, thank you for what you do. I think the biggest thing for service providers is plugging into the network, because the thing we have to work so tenaciously towards is capacity building. And service providers, we do ourselves a disservice when we minimize where we're at with capacity, and instead we just take on more and more and more, and our funding is cut and cut, and next thing you know, you have service providers with 1 or 2 or 3 staff members who are trying to serve all of these survivors, and they're not doing it very efficiently. So what I like to do is challenge service providers. Let's be very clear about our capacity and where we're at. Also, too, cultural competency. I love that you're serving the Latino community in such a specific way. We have staff that are Latino. We have staff that are Spanish speaking. That's their language of origin. But I guarantee we can learn and glean wisdom and probably have survivors that might be better served by your organization. And that is the lane in which service providers really have to get in and commit to. So please link arms with the service providers around here so that together we can build more capacity to serve survivors better collectively as a community.
Thank you. I think there was a question over there, then we're going to bounce back to this side.
I have one comment. She answered a lot of the questions, Dr. Wickey Byrd. Thank you so much. Wanted to give kudos to what they did yesterday, that the panelists who had been victims themselves are being honored in a way of also making some financial gain, because they had to pay the price. And I believe that as we hear more stories, I know we were all weeping yesterday just to hear them, and I believe as a community, I would love to see more of these opportunities. I know it takes a lot of work, Tomas, I know, but he has been doing a great job over the years. One More Child, incredible, but I did not know that UCF had this tremendous program. So, and I believe that many organizations like Dr. Diana Nuevo-Sendero and others, Hope and Justice, which is also specifically for the Portuguese community, we want to get involved, and like you said, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. Let's help each other. Let's bring the community and educate. The biggest thing that I learned yesterday, parents don't even know those apps. Yes. So how can we help the parents? Because obviously we need to start with us, but then the parents. And one quick thing is, as she was talking about the money, I was thinking, you know how many millions people are spending on campaigning right now? I would love to see some of those campaigns, contributions to also go towards this particular.
You heard it first here, folks. Send the campaign money. That was wonderful. I would like to address that, and thank you for wanting to collaborate and everything that you all do. And we agree there's a lot of people in the community supporting, and so we want to be the hub here at UCF for education, research, community outreach. So we can host these types of events. We can target different communities. We can target parents. You know, like Olivia and Tomas as well. I sit on the Central Florida Human Trafficking Task Force. So we have a outreach committee, and 2 times per year we do an event for the community. And we do it for parents. We do it for high school students. We'll do it for community at large. But we can target populations and then bring in our partners, because I'll say this a million times, we are not a silo standalone. We are collaborative. I want everybody to have a seat at my table, and I want everybody to have a plate at my table and a voice at my table. And luckily, I get to be at that table too. So for you all, let's collaborate, and things like this. And if you have ideas how to support your community, how to support the needs of that, bring it over here and we'll host it here. We will offer, and this goes for all the community, if you want to come here for an anti-trafficking event, UCF, the Human Trafficking and Modern Day Slavery Center, will donate this space for your event. You will not have to pay if you're hosting an anti-trafficking, and that's something that, because the state of Florida honored us with a couple coins, we're able to provide that to the community, and they were happy when we pitched that to them as well. So let's use this venue, let's use this spot to bring everybody together. Hope that answered a bit of the question.
Quickly, I just want to say we need to massively tell everyone, because this room should have been filled. And I believe that we need to use that power with the social media or all of the different people that may not even know about this gathering. And I told Tomas, let's see what we can do, each and every one of us. We need to do it. So the massive communication will be a great tool.
Dr. Wickey, may I just add something to what you said? I'm just thinking about this as I'm listening to Diana and others talk about every single thing comes down to resources, right, and funding. I think something that could be very useful out of your center here is to do some type of forum to teach non-for-profits how to raise money, how to go for resources, how to create metrics and measurables and action items, because collaboration is tremendous, but without the money to be able to do that work, it can sometimes feel just aspirational. So we could talk about this afterwards, but I was just thinking it would be a great, I think it'd be a great piece for you to put together for all of the people.
Would you come and help me with that?
I would be honored to. I'd be honored to.
Have an actionable outcome. Beautiful.
Hi.
Can we have one more question? Yes. And then I've got a closing question for everybody on the panel. Naomi, maybe as well.
Well, mine's going to be really quick. I just want to see more of boots on the ground, like more task force going into the schools. I'm with the organization. I've been in Florida for 3 years, and I think within the last 6 months, I've been hearing about human trafficking, and that really troubled my spirit. However, I went into multiple schools in New Jersey to speak to the young ones, because it starts in elementary school. And, it starts with the power and control. So, and what happens is the parents are not building the kids' self-esteem enough. The lights are on and nobody's home. So when you have someone like me who has a heart for the children, you need to expose the children, even if they're not getting it home. Parents don't know. They don't know. They think human trafficking is just dropping off the kids somewhere. You can literally be with your child and send them to the restroom, and somebody could be sitting there waiting for them. We know it happens all the time. So I just want more boots on the ground, more task force. I want to see more people going into the schools, making not only the parents aware, but making all the officials aware. The guidance counselors need to be aware, and they are not. They are not. Yeah. Okay?
Thank you very much. Very, very quick one. Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry. My name is Gina Howard. I just moved here about a year and a half to Orlando. And I want to thank you for having this because it's so important. I'm a survivor of, my mother sold me when I was 11 years old. And the person picked me up from school. So what she was saying, it happens very often. Sometimes it's people that you know. And sometimes it's your familiar, your family, friends. So for me, it was very dramatic. It took a toll on me. But what I did, I started to study, I started to prepare myself for counseling. I got my master's last December in counseling so that I can give back. So I can get back to those, I call them little Ginas, because there are many out there, that's my name. I said there are many little Ginas out there that need help. Because I've been a victim, I can recognize when someone is being a victim. In the Cayman Islands, I come from the Cayman Islands, there was a situation happened with a little girl and her father. We were driving, me and my husband, we stopped, picked up the father and the daughter, and they sat in the back seat, and the father held the child in his lap. And I said to him, can you please remove that child from your lap? Because there's a seat there for her. And he refused. I said, get out of my car. And my husband said, why did you do that? Why are you so harsh? I said, that man is raping that little girl. He said, what? I said, yes. And I felt so bad because I didn't do anything about it. Well, I didn't have no proof, but a few months down the line, there was this big headline in the newspaper. Father was abusing his daughter. He got her pregnant. Her inside was destroyed. He went to prison. And back then, I knew a couple of friends in the prison. I said, can you give him a welcome for me? Because I was angry. I was angry the fact that I couldn't do anything to stop it. Because without proof, you can't go around saying things. I just had this intuition because it happened to me. And I can look straight in her eyes and I saw her saying, help me. So this touched me really close, everything that's happening in this room right now. And I believe that we need to raise our voices and be advocates for these little girls, little boys, because it happened to boys too. I have an 8-year-old right now. I have 5 kids, but my youngest one, I go into the bathroom with him, in the public bathrooms, in women bathroom. He said, why you take me to the women bathroom? It's for your safety. So I'm so happy that this is happening, and I wish I can connect with any one of you so that I can provide my service with all the knowledge that I have been acquiring over the years to be able to make a difference in someone's life.
Thank you so much. Can I respond to that really quick?
Olivia, yes? Yes, of course.
I just want to thank you for your vulnerability in identifying yourself as a survivor in a public forum where you don't know everybody. That takes a lot of power and courage, and also a lot of courage to decide to educate yourself to then help so many people. I think what a lot of traffickers don't know is that by abusing some of us, they're creating advocates that are fighting for thousands of others. And that's a really powerful thing. I'd love to connect with you. I think it's so important to get involved in survivor community when you're also then serving other survivors. But thank you for what you're doing.
I don't know if it's me, but I can't believe the time has gone so quick. So we've got about 10 minutes to close. I'm going to start with the virtual team and then come to the team in person. 2 very quick questions with very, very short, punchy responses. So no pressure at all. Question 1, so I'm going to start with Gustavo. What's the greatest disconnect between intention and impact in the event space in trafficking? Intention and impact. And one practical solution, you've probably given yours, drive down the I-95 to Miami. But yeah, Gustavo, what's the issue between intention and impact? You've got about a minute. And then I'll come to
I'll be real quick. I mean, it's follow the money, right? Intention is nothing without the resources to act, right? And I think it's a great that we have the resources and intentionality, but we need to find the money in any way to make sure that we enable the service providers and everybody, and the intention becomes reality.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. On to Noel. Hi, Noel. Intention and impact. What's the gap?
Yeah, I believe it is bringing this public-private partnership together in the way that UCF is doing and leading, bringing technology, lived experience, the care providers, the AI, all into the battlefield, if you will. And I think that that's where we get the multiplication effect and get the impact that we're looking for.
Lovely. Thank you, Noel. Tomas.
Yes, I'd like to give Dr. Jessica Wickey, and I know she has an amazing board of advisors, an assignment that we create appointments this year with every single hospitality, tourism, and parks executive teams, from Disney to Universal to SeaWorld to Visit Orlando to the hotel and lodging, etc. The Greater Sports Commission and many others, and do bring Olivia and all our wonderful panelists, and let's have meetings to make them aware and educate them what these last 2 hours, the amazing information that was gathered on how we want to work together and how we want to make the Greater Orlando area not just the happiest place on earth, but the safest place on earth, and we can do that together.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And so we'll start with Alan and work our way down for the grand finale for Dr. Byrd. Alan.
In the state of Florida, you can pick up an alligator egg and walk across the road, and you've committed a felony. In the state of Florida, you can walk out in the woods and pick up a shed eagle's feather and take it into your house, and you've committed a federal crime, punishable by a year in prison and $5,000 fine. An alligator egg and the naturally shed feather of an eagle. But you can walk out of this building today and purchase a human being, and if you get caught, it's a misdemeanor. An alligator egg and a ruined human life. Felony, misdemeanor. We can talk numbers, we can talk data, we can talk all the peripherals that we want to talk, but when it's all said and done, it's a human life with dreams, hopes, aspirations, and the desire to just be loved. Never forget, it's the human that's being hurt. What does that mean in impact and action? Do something. Don't just talk about it. Pick up a phone and call a legislator. Walk into the district office of your state senator and say, this isn't right. Encourage somebody to give money so that those who are recovered can find their sense of purpose again, because when it's all said and done, they're beautifully and wonderfully made in the image of their Creator and have a right to belong.
It's beautiful. Always, Alan. Just from a funding perspective, is create your action item, understand what your purpose is, and then work your way forward. Go into your communities. Don't create a centralized base of funding for what you need to have done. Purposefully put your funding together and then go forward and reach out into your communities, whether it's individuals, corporations, foundations, they're all there. They're all there for the asking. But really, and you can raise this money when you have measurables, when you have metrics to share, when you have stories to tell. It's there for the asking. So go out and raise that money for this really important cause.
so many pieces of wisdom are shared. I'm gonna watch this again. I think as far as intention and outcome, especially from the service provider perspective, and Olivia, you might speak to this, so I don't want to, I'll just share briefly, but it is, we want to protect and make life better for victims and survivors, but we don't always know what that takes, right? We hang our hat on things like just prevention, or we hang our hat on short-term solutions. And so what I think we need to do more of is centering that survivor's voice to really be the expert in the room to teach all of us of how we do that effectively and in a way that actually it leads to long-term changes and meaningful changes in that person's life.
A survivor colleague friend of mine shared that press conferences never paid her rent when she was exiting the life of exploitation. So the intention to raise awareness, the intention to show a survivor that you care is a beautiful thing, but if that is not actually specifically impacting an area of a survivor or a victim's exit from the life of exploitation, it truly means nothing. We can talk about it, but we actually have to do something about it. Survivors don't care to just hear that 10 people were trained in a training today. Survivors care when their life changes.
That's a tough one to follow that. To the funding question. It's all about the money. Really is, right? I want organizations like all of you to, and everyone in the room, to be able to siphon off as much money out of these alien events. Events have they're temporary occurrences, right? So they have no long-term stake in your place. You're not going to convince anyone in Brussels or Switzerland that they should care about what, right? They should. Moralistic reasoning does not work for big entities like these, right? That's the reality. So when it comes to social policies, I've wrote some notes. They often fail entirely. Doesn't matter whether it's regeneration, gentrification, kicking out socioeconomically deprived area, it doesn't matter. They all do the same thing, right? So they always fail pretty much on most of the intention